The following is a conversation with Danielle Rager. Danielle is a neuroscientist as well as a great electronic music producer. If you like what you hear, you can support us on Patreon. Follow us there on patreon.com/industrial Detroit. Check out our Bandcamp, detroitindustrial.bandcamp.com. And we're on all the social media stuff, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I appreciate your support, and thanks for tuning in. All right. Yeah, life is, pretty strange. How's everything in Pittsburgh?
It's all right. I mean, things are getting a lot worse here as well, unfortunately, with COVID. I'm a little paranoid, especially now that it's like right after the holiday season. We've had this surge of cases. So that obviously makes life very strange because, I just feel like I can't really safely go out and do a lot of things anymore unless they're outdoors. But
Yeah,
eventually we'll have a vaccine, I guess, and hopefully, and life will go back to some semblance of normality.
I hope so. I feel like before we get the vaccine to everybody, it's just gonna wash over enough people where,
Yeah, that whole herd immunity thing.
I
One or
mean,
the other. In some fashion, I hope that
I think
it's less of a problem, but we'll see.
it's been definitely like psychologically debilitating in many regards. I feel like just like not playing shows, and I don't know. I'm kind of a hermit, and being at shows is like one of the few times that I'm around people and having conversations.
Yeah, it's definitely hearing, and even just hearing music that loud out of speakers these days is like very interesting and jarring, given that there are so few shows. Like many months ago, this was towards the beginning of quarantine, so Kevin and I have our we used to put on shows, and our speakers are still sitting in this warehouse space, even though we obviously haven't been using them or throwing any shows. But we
Yeah.
got like five of our friends together for, do you know Woody? She's another musician. She lives in Pittsburgh now. But for Woody's birthday, we just got together like a small group, like literally five people, and went to the warehouse space and just listened
Hmm.
to music on like a big PA. And it was so wild because I hadn't heard music
Bass.
out of like a full PA system. Yeah, no bass and anything for
Yeah.
months. So
I've done that. I mean, I have it set up at the Kung Fu school where I teach in the basement. I have this little, the PA system down there. And a couple of times I hang out with my friend Justin, who runs Low Res or whatever. And, it's like, we're like, I don't know, are we wearing masks or not wearing masks? I don't know. But we got drunk and listened to a bunch of music, and that was fun. Uh, and then another time I hung out with Cody and we DJ'd this live stream and listened to it on the on the PA system. And it's definitely like you need that, you know.
it's so different for music that does. I mean, it's funny. I care about it so much more now. I came from a more like classical background and then originally made more ambient stuff. And to be fair, even now, I guess I appreciate that even when I make ambient music, I try to include a fair amount of sub bass. But admittedly, it wasn't really something I thought about when I first started making music because I wasn't really used to making dance heavy music. And so
Yeah.
I didn't really like the idea of a big speaker system being that much different than your home listening. I feel like didn't click as much for me because the bass was just not as much of a necessity for the music that I was making. But yeah, now that I make music with rhythms, it's like it just doesn't read the same way at all half the time on a large system as it does on a smaller one.
Yeah, I end up checking a lot of mixes on the PA system for sure. And I guess the car too, because the car, it's good for that. But
Yeah, the car test is always a good one.
drive around, listen to it. Yeah, pick up some different stuff. Yeah, that set you did for, yeah, thanks for doing that fundraiser again for victims of domestic violence. That was great.
Yeah, of
So
course. That was, I'm really glad that you held that too, because like I said, I know that that's been especially kind of a concern, unfortunately, during quarantine time
I
because
mean,
a lot of people are stuck in their homes.
I'm feeling like, yeah, I'm here with two kids and, my partner, and, you know, it's hard. It's, you gotta be like, you gotta be, you gotta have a place to go and chill out, whatever. I don't know. I can see how this,
Tensions definitely flare when you don't get enough personal time or space. And I think a lot of
yeah,
people are, even people with healthy relationships, like you said, it's just being in close quarters for so long is definitely takes a tax on your mental health.
yeah. So I don't know. I just thought that was important, but yeah, your set was, it was, it sounded different than other sets. Like it was like crisp, clear, it was right in your face. Like, I don't know what, like, and, I've looked at what you guys were doing before, like at the title, it's title, right? Or
Tidal Cycles is, I
title
guess, the full
cycles.
name now. It used to just be Tidal, and it did actually exist before the like Jay-Z streaming service and all of that. But there was
Right
some
now it's
confusion when that started. So I think
right.
the official name now is Tidal Cycles.
Yeah, if you're googling it, and you type in title, you're not gonna get the sound generating software. You're gonna get the streaming service probably, right? Um, but yeah, so like I've dabbled in C sound in the, I think it was the late 90s or early 2000s, and it was just, you type it in and there's a compiler and you press it and it generates the thing and you listen to it. So you have no idea what's, so I feel like with this, you're so far beyond where you can hear it right away and it doesn't
Yeah.
stop,
So I admittedly I've never used C Sound. The first kind of programmatic music language that I had ever used was Super Collider. And it is worth making a distinction. So actually Tidal Cycles technically runs on top of Super Collider these days for its sound engine, because Tidal Cycles itself doesn't have a sound engine. It doesn't produce sound. What it does do is it's a very fancy sequencer. So it
Gotcha.
basically it is it's an algorithmic functional way of writing out sequences, not, obviously just for drums, but any samples or MIDI that you want to throw at it, it can sequence. But it needs something else to produce the actual sound. So it used to have its own sound engine. It was called Dirt, but now I guess they figured the one in Super Collider was already more developed, and just made more sense to use that. So now Tidal runs on top of this layer called Super Dirt, which really is a Super Collider sound engine. So that's one way that it's a little bit different from kind of previous algorithmic languages. It's not so much geared at like writing custom synth patches. You can't really produce sound in it, but it's like a very advanced sequencer. And then to your point, what I really like about it is the kind of immediate feedback cycle. So you were commenting on the fact that, yeah, in Tidal, you essentially you launch your lines of code live and the things immediately change.
Yeah,
So
that's
there's
amazing.
so it makes it fantastic for live performance for one, but also honestly, I just, now that I've gotten used to using it, I kind of hate drum programming with anything else, just because I feel like the time from conception of pattern to hearing pattern is so short with this feedback cycle that it's
Hmm.
like, I guess to be fair, I've never worked in hardware, so I know a lot of people like to sequence in hardware, but before I was drum programming in Tidal, I was just drum programming in like Ableton. And I would honestly say that I could spit out drum patterns much faster and change things much faster in Tidal and hear the feedback than I can with like drum programming in Ableton. And so that's what I'm kind of addicted to, is this like fast payoff of hearing rhythms that you want to hear.
So, yeah, okay. So what were you using when you're doing it in Ableton? So the push, or were you?
So yeah, I do own a push. So sometimes I would do it with the push, or other times, I guess this is like the much slower method, but you can just like piano roll it or whatever.
Yeah, I love doing that though. I feel like I have the ultimate control. I actually click the thing where I need it to go, But
No, I would agree with that. I would say, so I still use Ableton a ton. For the record, that set that I played, my title comes into Ableton because I do a lot of sound
okay.
processing in Ableton.
Hmm.
Admittedly, there are some like kind of filters and built-in things in Super Collider. I don't love them, especially compared to, I just think a lot of the VSTs these days are so amazing when you're talking about
Yeah.
like multiband compression or anything like that. There's all these amazing tools for sound processing that I can use in live. So even when I'm playing in Tidal, I tend to bring everything into live just because I like to kind of have that final polish on it, that I feel like I can't as easily get from Super Collider. So I route all of my Tidal sounds into live when I play. But to your point, certainly, particularly like my recorded music, still makes very heavy use of Ableton. I use both quite a bit, back and forth, and because I would say it's this, there on one hand with Tidal, what you get is kind of rapid prototyping and also this random or generative quality that I really like. It's easy to inject your drum patterns with kind of a generative quality, but sometimes I really want that super fine precision, and that's not an approach that's always super easy to take with Tidal. Like if I want to go in and have control over every note, like you're saying, then
Hmm.
I do really prefer a DAW for that. And so I feel like I like using them both in combination.
Yeah, I started with hardware sequencers, all the different types, but I love the pattern sequencer where it's, just a 16 notes and you just press it, where you want it to go, like the 808 style, you know. But I have all this gear, but a lot of times when I'm in the studio, I do end up just using Abletons and just sampling little bits of the gear, And I sit here, I'm like, yeah, that's nice synth, I'm just gonna do my thing right here. So I'm definitely here with I feel like it's just pretty easy to compose in Ableton's like the finished product, versus gear where you're trying to fuck with like different ways that different gear does song mode or does it do song mode or whatever, and it's like, okay, let's just get the patterns in here or get the sounds in here and we'll finish it in the box. But
Absolutely. That's how I make all of my recorded music as well. For my live sets, I tend to do more in Tidal than I do in a recorded setting, just because you don't want to be, messing with a million tools at once when you're playing live. So
sure.
I found that working mostly in Tidal for live sets recently has been nice. But when I'm recording music, even when it's the title segments, like you said, I do something very similar to what you're talking about. I'll record like chunks of drum patterns and then kind of go in and touch them up and rearrange
Yeah.
things, just because I like that final in the box step.
Yeah, I mean, you can see everything. I just, I think about people back in a day using tape and like editing tape and just how tedious that. I mean, I'm sure there were people that were like really into it, sitting there in the chopping block. Like I watched a documentary about that guy Connie Plank, who did their early Noi and Kraftwerk stuff,
Oh,
and
cool.
all the krautrock. He's a German producer, and yeah, he would, he'd sit there and I guess he was a wizard with the tape, and it's like, oh my god, you know. It's same for video editing. I mean, people back in the day chopping that tape, instead of
Yeah,
Final Cut where you can see everything.
I'm so amazed by people that had those like very physical processes. I guess that's one way where I'm like a true millennial in that I've always been very married to my computer for production. So the kind of
I
old
mean,
school way of like where it was like a very physical music process. Yeah, I'm still sort of dumbfounded by the people that used to do everything that way.
yeah, dead tapes. I definitely started when it started it was dead tapes in the 90s. I'm aging myself here, but and then we started recording on mini discs because that was easy. And mini discs are like a very I don't know, I thought they would take off, but they never did. But they're so cool, you know, they look cool and you can like throw them across the room, they don't scratch, you know. So mini discs. But yeah, I have a ton of I have like 50 mini discs from those days, and yeah. But yeah, it was there was a moment in that documentary where the guys from DAF, uh, that band or whatever, they're like, yeah, here's the album, and they take out this giant box, and it's this giant box of tape, and they put it down on a table. There's got to be satisfying to be like, I made this thing, versus like in a browser where you're like, I made that file right there, you know. I don't know.
For sure. It's yeah, the when you can see kind of the magnitude of your efforts in physical space. That's not something I've really had. It's even, I guess, when I was like writing classical music when I was in college, to be fair, like I was, these days, almost everybody does it with, it's software aided. There's like sheet music programs, right? So it's like there's not that
Yeah,
many people that sit down and just like write out sheet music by hand anymore, I feel
by
like.
candlelight with the what do you call it, the the ink pen or whatever. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about this classical training you had. What's because I know you're a scientist, right? And
Yeah, I mean, so certainly my career or my day job is in, it's in science, neuroscience specifically. So I
okay.
do like computational neuroscience research, which doesn't sound like a real discipline sometimes when I say it out loud, but what I always sort of compare it to, so there's a fair amount that we know about the brain, but the tools that we have for directly probing brain activity right now are not so great if we don't want to harm the person or the
Right.
animal. And you don't want to harm the person or the animal because if they're not kind of naturally awake and behaving, then it's like not useful brain information anymore, right? Like we want to know how people use their brains and think when they're like, you know, awake and behaving and acting normal. um, so I guess the short of it is that there's a limited, we're limited by the technology in the number of neurons in your brain that we can record at one time. So sort of what I do is make computational models or like extrapolations of what we
Hmm.
think is happening in the whole brain based on kind of the minimal portions that we can see or observe. So I guess in that way I always say it's like, it's maybe sort of what a lot of like space scientists do is a good analogy. Like there's a limited portion of space that we can observe at, you know, a given time because it's expensive and all of these other things. There are certain areas of space that we, you know, obviously can't even humanly reach, but we have all these theories about how the physics of space work, based on the little bit that we do observe. So I guess I sort of do a similar, or try to do a similar thing as a neuroscientist to make theories with little pieces of neural data. Um, so that's my day job. But yeah, for the classical training, I grew up as a violinist.
Right.
I started playing when I was like 9, which actually isn't even that early in the classical world. But I even in college I minored in performance, in music, because it was still really dear to me. So yeah, I started from a classical violin background.
That's cool. I mean, I remember when me and Dave came into Pittsburgh to play that show, and we met you. I think that then it's all a blur, but you had like the violin case. You just play a show too, like that night, and you had like a violin case and a push. You're like, yeah, I just play a set. I'm like, oh, cool. She's got the push and the violin going. That's got to be interesting. Uh,
I still do that occasionally, but admittedly, I'm getting further and further away from it. My music still has a lot of my string playing in it, but I have been recording and sampling more lately. I think the thing is the electronic side of my production used to be a lot less involved, and now it's gotten a lot more involved. So it's kind of hard to be playing violin and dealing with all of the title typing or knob twiddling at once. So I don't know. I feel like some people have mixed feelings about that. I think there are people that miss when I used to play live a lot more. I'll still do that occasionally, but yeah, I've been doing less of that lately. But there's still a lot of string recordings in the music, I guess. So
Interesting. Yeah. So you're taking that knowledge of music and applying it to this electronic side of things now.
yeah, I mean, I still like I really love orchestral timbres and textures, and
Yeah.
they feature very heavily in my music still, I would say, even though it's taken a more dance, if you could call it that, tone. My music's a little bit the rhythms aren't particularly straight, so it's not exactly the world's best dance music, but it's certainly more rhythmic than it was in
Mm.
previous iterations. And so, but yeah, even considering that, I probably use a lot more orchestral sounds than a lot of people. And some of that I think is just comfort. Like I came from that world, so kind of incorporating wind and string sounds and all of these other things, my brain just kind of immediately gravitates towards a lot of those timbres. So yeah, in a funny way, that hasn't really changed that much, even though I've been making music with more rhythms. There's still like a lot of orchestral sampling that happens.
Do you feel like the neuroscience part of of the research that you're doing is that informing your compositions, your musical stuff?
I
Is
mean,
there a direct, you
I
know?
certainly like to, so I do study it within neuroscience. I would say most of the things that I study specifically are kind of sensory perception and
Hmm.
some multi-sensory integration. And so do I think about how your brain processes sounds? Yes, definitely. Is that always easy to translate into something that's directly applied into making music? Mm, not always, I would say, unless it's like there are certain kind of auditory tricks that are interesting, like shepherd tones and stuff. So I mean, when you know a little bit about neuroscience, you can start to reason a little bit more about why those perceptual tricks work. But I mean, people have been using that kind of stuff for ages, so it's not really like I'm bringing anything new in that game. But yeah, I mean, I do like to think about multisensory integration a lot. I've also been getting more in the past like year and a half into doing my own visuals. So like for
I
the set that I did for you guys, I did some visuals in GLSL, or shader language, that were like audio reactive.
Okay.
Um, so I really like, because I study multisensory integration things, I guess that is one thing I kind of like, is how your brain pairs visuals and sounds. And I feel like that format has been working particularly well during quarantine too, because
Mm.
there's been all these kind of live streams, and uh, I feel like it's hard to capture on video like me doing electronic things. So I feel like it's kind of more interesting or fun to watch visuals in this format anyway. So I guess I've been playing around with that more, and that does make me think about, I guess, how your brain marries sounds and visuals. But
Definitely a couple of things about that. It's interesting you bring up, it is probably not the most exciting thing to watch somebody do coding. Uh, Although I do like the lines of code on the screen. I think that's exciting. But watching somebody with a laptop is always like, there's a whole like school, yeah, there's a whole spectrum of people in the industrial scene anyway, where they're like, oh, he's not, it's not gear, and it's like, all right, whatever. But I think it's a funny, but those visuals I did notice during the streaming, and they're reacting to your sound. So I was gonna ask you about, so was that live or?
Yeah, so I do the visuals. So they're in what's called shader language, which is it's a thing that's used in like video games a lot. Basically, it's really fast. It's optimized to run on your GPU, your graphical processing unit. So it's something that's like very snappy for live use. So it's part of most graphics pipelines, but like often it's the final step after so people will like make their models with their meshes and stuff if you're making a video game. I don't tend to do that kind of detailed work quite as much, but often the shader language is kind of like the last step on top of that pipeline in a video game, which is kind of how you texture things in real time. Like if you're walking around a video game world, you have water that looks like it's kind of moving and changing from lots of different angles. A lot of that stuff is done with shader languages because it has to be really fast. So I came to like shader languages just because the way that they're written is quite it's kind of like matrix manipulations. It's quite mappy. It's very related to like it's basically like you're using linear algebra very directly, which for
Awesome.
me is nice because that's like I do a lot of that kind of stuff for my day job. So for me, it just came sort of quickly, I guess. But yeah, so they run in real time. So it was, the application was like live running as I was doing it. It's not recorded. And then basically I just have I have the shader visuals react to either like banded volume, so just kind of like an FFT of the different frequency bands, and like the high ranges will trigger something or the low ranges will trigger something. Or if I'm doing MIDI stuff, I can have them react to MIDI signals of various kinds too. But a lot of stuff you can achieve with just different volume bands, to be honest. So yeah, just making shapes jump and things based on the inputs that are coming in is kind of fun and easy.
No, it looked good, and I didn't realize it was all matrix manipulation. So what are you doing with the matrix? Are you reducing the matrix? Are you?
Well, so like most, I guess what I meant by that is that most transformations of a 3D object can be expressed with matrix math. And so sometimes in the video game rendering chain, you're kind of far away from that, meaning there's like several levels of abstraction before you're dealing with that. They kind of handle it for you. Shader language is more low level, so you're kind of doing those shape manipulations manually. But yeah, so I mean, like rotation and sizing and all of these things are essentially just transformation matrices in linear algebra. But I don't know, it sounds dumb, but like I'm worse at working with the super graphical visual tools, like the ones that, I don't know, like I don't know that much Unity yet, as an example. That's like a big video game one. So I would kind of just rather work with like the lower level code, but that's because it's closer to my day job. So I like shaders for that, and they happen to be fast, so that part's nice.
I really liked linear algebra in school, so I don't know.
You should look into shader language. You can make cool visuals for your stuff.
I guess so. I didn't. Yeah, I have this math degree I totally don't use, and I should probably do something with it.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot. We talked about this the first time I met you. So I feel like, yeah, you would definitely like shader language. There's a lot of derivatives too because of lighting. So people do, even in video games, I was saying it's kind of the last pass layer. People do all of their kind of lighting usually with
Mm.
shader effects, so that when you're walking past an object from different directions, it looks realistic the way that the light is bouncing off of it. But
Sure.
that's all like gradients off of 3D shapes. So yeah,
Ah,
sorry, now
yeah.
we're down in the weeds, but it's stuff you would probably like a lot.
Yeah, yeah, some calc stuff in there, you know. Well, I should look into it. But that's kind of part of the reason why the thing that you guys are doing is pretty fascinating with this. So, like, is there a? So I know you're doing it. I know Kevin is doing it. I guess.
Yeah, it would be remiss to say, I mean, or not to say rather, that, yeah, I mean, Kevin's really the one who got me interested in using Tidal. He's been using it for a long time, many more years than I have. I've been doing it for like a year and a half, maybe 2 years at most at this point. He's definitely
I
been using
think
it for like 5 plus.
I think like 2015 or 16, I was in Pittsburgh with Ishtar. It was this death rock project, and we played Don's house. And Kevin was like, "It was the first time I met him, and he was like, you want to hear this music I just made with this software?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess so." And we played it, and I was like, "That's amazing." I was like, "That sounds really good. What the hell did you do?" You know. So that was it was it was interesting. I don't know, because when people say stuff like that, I'm like, yeah, I don't know, but it's nice to be surprised, you know. Um, as a talented chap there. Yeah, so there's like a community of people in Pittsburgh, I guess, that are on this path, you know, like.
Yeah, I guess we do have a reasonable density of people here. Me and Kevin certainly. Our friend Morgan Wisniewski, who performs as Morgantix, is pretty deep into Tidal. There's a group that we honestly, these meetings have sort of fallen to the wayside even before quarantine happened. But for a little while, we had like a live coding meetup that we would do
Sure, yeah.
every once in a while in Pittsburgh, which a bunch of people participated in, even people who are kind of just getting into using it but not out there performing with it yet. Shar Stiles used to live in Pittsburgh. She's now back in New York, but she's quite well known for, she's mostly a visual live coder. So she pairs with people who do the sound part of it, and she does kind of
Mm.
exclusively visuals. She's actually part of the reason that I got into the shader visual thing. But yeah, she's very talented, deeply talented on just the visual end. So yeah, I guess Pittsburgh does in the US certainly have a reasonably high density of people kind of doing live coding things. The arguably I would say like biggest, or I mean, so there's a very large community in the UK, and that's not least because the creator of Tidal, Alex McLean, is there. And
Mm.
so, you know, there's, I would say he, in making the language, you know, built up a fairly large community. But yeah, I mean, as far as the US goes, there's certainly people scattered everywhere at this point, but Pittsburgh has a pretty high density, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a couple of people in Detroit that are doing the visual stuff, but I don't know of anybody that's really. Of course, I don't know. I'm hang out within the same circle of people, but I haven't seen anybody being like, I'm using Tidal for my live set so far. You know, maybe this will open it up. I don't know. Maybe people will be like, well, I do have your set still, I think, on Twitch. So if people want to check it out,
Oh, cool.
go there. And I did download it. And I was thinking about putting it up somewhere and talk to you about it. I don't know. But yeah, it's pretty amazing the stuff that you can do. Like some of the broken beat stuff, you know, like I don't. That was pretty interesting to hear. Like sparsely chopped breaks in there, you know.
Yeah, I guess I've been on. I always think it's kind of funny. Sometimes other people are better at describing your sound than you. I don't know if that makes any sense, but like I will do things and I'll be on a certain like sonic kick and like I won't even really, I'm doing it sort of subconsciously and like I won't even really know what to call it, and then other people will give it words and you're like, oh, I guess I do kind of hear that. So I feel like people have been saying that my recent stuff is very like minimal glitch dub are like three words that I've heard, and I'm like, I kind of get that, I guess.
You
So
just
I think I've been on a very sparse kick lately, because I think I was doing all of this like really lush ambient music, and when I started to make more rhythmic music, I guess I was really interested in like stripping it back and getting
mm,
it to the kind of essence.
well, I
Um,
think it's working. There's definitely, it captures you, and then there's these sparse things happening, and it's yeah, it's hard to describe your own stuff. You're just like, I'm just doing my thing, man. What do you want? um yeah, do you feel like, so you got this neuroscience day job, you're doing some math stuff there, and you're kind of bringing it to your music. Like, what about the influence of just being in Pittsburgh, and it being sort of this, I guess it's Midwest, yeah, Midwest blue collar aesthetic that it has, and kind of an industrial city, you know. Are you guys still in that one house that's uh
Yeah, we're in this very very like tall standalone house. We've got this kind of crazy roof. Pittsburgh is this
yeah,
very hilly city, so we're like on top of a big hill.
yeah,
Our house is actually really crazy in terms of musicians. It's always sort of been. We just went through a recent rotation, so for a while it was me and Kevin, who performs as Spednar, up here, and on the ground floor it was Machine Girl, both of them, and it used to be a five-star hotel, who's actually from Detroit
right, right, right.
originally. Uh, so she moved out with her partner recently, but now we actually have Bonnie and Nikos from Kill Alters that are living downstairs. So yeah, it's kind of this crazy standalone music zone in the middle of Polish Hill in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it's an interesting area. It looks a little dilapidated, and it reminds me of like the old school Pittsburgh vibes for sure, which I can appreciate. I feel like a lot of it is getting cleaned up now, right? Like the South Side and all that stuff. And
Yeah, definitely the South Side and kind of the East End in Pittsburgh have become more gentrified. Polish Hill, so far, not so much yet. Uh,
uh,
Hopefully, knock on wood, it won't happen super quickly so that we don't get priced out.
right, that's really what happens. I encourage everybody to buy property before that happens, but it's hard when you're an artist and blah blah blah. I know, but yeah, it's like you gotta. Yeah, it happened in Detroit, and it happened quickly. Like 5 years. You could see it coming, but you're like, oh no, it's not gonna happen here. And then it was like, now it's this much, and you're like, oh man, all right, that's crazy. But with this COVID thing, hey, I don't know. That's one thing it did do, is slow down the gentrification.
That is true.
It's like the commercial properties are now, I mean, people are going out of business left and right. So buying commercial right now is probably a good idea. I don't know. I'm looking around, you just need a lot of money down, right? And then you can get it. I mean, we're going to be a transformed culture coming out of this. Even when we get back to quote unquote normal, I don't think it's going to be the same normal anymore.
I would agree with that. I mean, at least for myself, I would say like the sort of general level of paranoia, kind of germaphobe stuff is going to be messed up for a while. I think I didn't used to be someone who was particularly paranoid at all. And now I feel like, I don't know, like this is a dumb example, but I mean, just the thought of like going anywhere and seeing a free food sample out like right now
Oh,
is absolutely
no.
crazy, you know? And like that was a thing that was definitely not crazy a year ago. So
I guess I mean, all the weird social things. I mean, people say, yeah, once we get enough drinks in us, it'll be fine. But um, you go to the bar, you start drinking, you'll probably be okay. But I feel like the level of I know it sounds paranoid, but seeing how 9/11 went and the Patriot Act and all that stuff. I don't want to get too political, but I mean, if you look at it, that was never let go. And then you had Snowden that exposed the whole thing that was going on with it, you know.
right.
So what's getting enacted right now with this COVID stuff? I mean, it's all
Yeah, that is definitely a concern. I mean, not least, I know, for example, on the tech side, it's there's been sort of this trade-off that people have had to so like contact tracing, I guess. There's this idea
yeah,
that you can sort of trace the spread of the disease through cell phone use, by
right.
whether or not you've been around someone who has recently been diagnosed for too long of a period. And so on one hand, that's this like really powerful technology that could really help epidemiologists stop the spread of this disease. On the other hand, there's obviously like a slew of privacy concerns that come with this idea of tracking people over long periods of time to see where they are. And so, yeah, I don't know. It certainly, to your point, I guess, akin to something like how the Patriot Act changed 9/11. I feel like there will be all these sort of privacy concerns that come along with kind of uh, pandemic diseases that will have to be careful of going forward.
Yeah, I feel like the pandemic will probably get resolved within the year, but these things that are instilled, these new methods of, I mean, just the fact, I understand you have to go and stay inside and the virus is out there, but, once you can tell people to do that and they do it, like, wouldn't you be able to just say that anytime? Would they back off from that, like, and not use that now? Because they're a
Yeah, I
bunch
know
of
that's
good
also been
guys,
a concern for a lot of people, is that it obviously, there's also been this sort of increase in sort of state and federal
Yeah.
power, in terms of down to kind of minute details of people's daily lives, which for the time being, I would argue personally is okay and somewhat necessary. I mean, that's obviously,
But
up
but
for
then
debate, but I see, yeah, there's certainly this argument that, you don't really want that much daily lifestyle interference forever from your government.
no, but then it's like, why would they stop? Remove the virus and imagine you're still in lockdown, Like, I know it sounds paranoid, but like that's, and just, yeah, the Michigan, just, they released the app, the contact tracing app. And, there's like probably a good 100,000 people already downloaded and using it. You have to have your Bluetooth on everywhere. That's one of the things. I'm like, what? That's not cool, because that's how people get into your stuff, whatever. But yeah, no, it's guess we'll see how it goes. And being in the experimental electronic music scene, industrial, whatever it is, cyberpunk, like we're watching it all come true in a way is a bit unnerving, because you read all these sci-fi novels and it's like now I don't know. Do you feel like we're living it, I mean, it's 2020, so that in itself sounds whatever, but the pandemic and whatever, all this stuff surrounding it. That's definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely it is very science fiction sounding on paper. Sometimes it's hard to remember that this is the real world right now.
They're the Twitter president, and it's crazy. Like, um, but yeah, I mean, I'm glad you guys in Pittsburgh are holding it down like that. You know, and doing your thing.
Trying to, yeah, it's been, I mean, like you said, in recent months, it's been tricky, obviously, to do anything on the live music front. But that
Well,
is
the
one
stream.
nice thing, I
Yeah.
guess, about the kind of live coding angle is that I do think that a lot of live coders have had a slightly easier time transitioning to streaming world, just because, like I said, I do feel like with the whole like showing your code thing, it
Yeah.
itself a little bit to that format. But I definitely miss live shows at this point.
Oh, dude, I miss him so much. That's ridiculous. But we were gonna, um, me and Dave were gonna tour. We put together the new Fluxion AD record, and it's pretty much ready to go. I just haven't released it because I'm like, what am I gonna? I'm gonna put it up online and be like, here's the record, and then whatever, I want to. We had like 3 or 4 dates booked. One of them was Pittsburgh, I believe. And so we're gonna do this like little East Coast thing to at least support it a little bit, But that was
Yeah,
supposed
I actually have a like terrible confession. So I'm like I really don't like mailing things out.
I don't
Sounds
either.
stupid, but so this is like the first time I'm admitting this in a public setting, but I still have like a reasonable number of reality structure tapes left. And this happened because I released the album and then we immediately went into quarantine. And I figured I was just going to sell all of my copies at live shows and then no
Sure.
live shows ever happened. And then I've just been lazy, I guess. So now I have this like stash of tapes sitting around. So I guess if there's anyone listening to this that wants a tape now, you know the inside scoop and that you can
Oh,
hit
dude.
me
I
up.
mean, I feel you so much on hate. I hate going into post offices. I don't know what it is about it, but I think I hate going to post office. I hate checkouts at grocery stores too. I don't like those. I don't know. There's something about that that just is unnerving. But yeah, I have, it sucks when you get somebody, um, you know, um, ordering something on Bandcamp from you, and then you realize it's been 2 weeks, you still haven't mailed it, and you gotta go do that now, and it's just like, oh god, yeah, it's not a good quality for trying to run a label, like an independent label where you have to do everything yourself. Hi, Azara. This is my daughter, Azara.
Hi, nice to meet you.
This is Danielle. All right, I'll be done in a little bit. Okay. Okay. Um, I'll see you upstairs in a minute. Okay. Yeah, she's bored. She's doing schoolwork via Zoom. It's tough.
I feel that. It's got to be so much worse, even for kids. Like, even for me, I mean, on one hand, I am extremely fortunate to be able to do the work that I do in a remote setting, because obviously it's safer. I still have a job, etc. But so I'm not complaining by any means, but I will say, even as like a full grown adult, the days just get so monotonous. Like I don't see anyone ever except in Zoom meeting format.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
that's
not
brutal,
really
man.
the same.
I mean, I hope to do this in person someday, but for now, I started doing this podcast a few months ago, and I actually haven't done it over the summer. I was like, well, I don't have a deadline or anything. I don't need to do it, but I'm just picking it back up now just because I want to know stuff, and also talking to people is cool. I don't know. I don't get really to do that much. So I've been I teach martial arts, and I've been teaching these kung fu classes. Um,
Do you
you
do
know,
that remotely?
well, now I do. Right, we're in
Oh,
lockdown now in Michigan, so starting whatever it was a couple of weeks ago. So, and we went through a period of doing that from like March to May, and then in June I was like, all right, let's do it in person now. But then, you know, it just kept, the cases kept getting more and more, or whatever. So now it went back into lockdown. So it's this, yeah, it works on Zoom or whatever, but of course, it's better in person.
yeah. I hadn't even thought about this until recently, but a friend, another live coding friend, Mike, he performs as Kindome, but his daughter is a violinist, and we were she's still in high school, and we were just talking online the other day, and I hadn't even thought about like what it's like to try to be taking lessons. Like for me as an instrumental performer, that used to be so critical to me progressing and getting
Sure.
better. And unfortunately, now that I have a day job and a bunch of other obligations, I don't, I'm not nearly as good as of a classical violinist anymore, and I don't take lessons anymore. But if I was like in high school and trying to get better at my instrument, he was saying she's doing remote lessons, I think, and that just sounds so much harder than trying to work with someone in person.
It is harder, but I mean, at least we have this, right? Because
That's
imagine the 1918 one, the whatever, the Spanish flu or whatever it was, pandemic, where they had nothing, and they're just like, all right,
Yeah,
go sit in your house.
that is a good comparison, I guess. By in that sense, I'm thankful for modern technology.
I
There's
mean, yeah, I know, and I, I don't like all the virtual stuff, but at the same time, I'm like, got to be a little bit thankful that we're at this point technologically, because it could be like, what if it happened 20 years ago? You know, you just have the AOL chat room or whatever, which I feel like that's kind of what Twitch is now, as that it has that AOL chat room vibe where you're playing.
Yeah, I will say I definitely miss live shows, and I certainly would not opt to permanently replace live shows with like the Twitch format. But I don't hate the idea of the typing during live shows. I will say that part of it is probably like a nostalgia for chat rooms from being a teenager, but also honestly, it's a non-disruptive way to communicate, because I know, like, while someone is playing, because I know that as much as I love live shows, a lot of times you're at a live show and there's that person that you haven't seen in a while that means well, and it's just trying to like talk at almost full volume while somebody's playing, and you're like, dude, I'm trying to listen to this set. And so
Yeah,
I do like the fact that you can sort of carry on tiny side conversations and still have your ears to listen with. That part is nice, but I wouldn't trade it permanently for live shows.
no, there's some kind of weird combo that can happen where you're performing live but also streaming. I think that will happen probably. A lot more streams now that we're all proficient and figured it out. 'Cause I don't think I wasn't doing Twitch anything before March.
No, I wasn't either. I was also laughing about how I feel like Zoom suddenly just like completely overtook the video chat market. To be fair, I
Oh
wasn't
yeah.
I wasn't video chatting that much before this whole scenario, but like I had never admittedly even heard of Zoom until I feel like February or March of this year.
Where's that time machine, man? Just like buy some Zoom stock, because that was apparently it's the thing to do. Yeah, no, it's yeah, the side conversation thing. It's kind of like having psychic powers if you're, because you can see everybody's side conversations as you're playing if you're looking at it, right? So it's like if
That's
you're,
another funny thing about, so I've done a fair amount of streams in the past, since if we're counting all the way back from like March. And I would say it's been about half and half. Some of them have been actually live, meaning I'm truly playing when people are watching it. And then there's been another half where sometimes if there's going to be lots of performers, people opt to, they're worried about how fast people can transition, between, especially if you have a bunch of people that aren't necessarily used to streaming. They're just worried about kind of this constant stream switching, which I understand. So then sometimes people have asked for video performances, like I will tape myself doing it and send it to one
Right.
person,
Yeah.
puts them all together and airs it. Those are really weird because you're not doing anything but watching yourself play in real time and watching other people react to you play in real time, which I feel is very unnatural, at least compared to a live show setting. So it's like, yeah, I have mixed feelings about it. It gets rid of the stage fright portion of it, I guess. So that part's cool, but it is kind of weird to just watch people listen to your music live.
Yeah, I've been doing this DJ stuff, which I was now. I mean, I would DJ a little bit, but now I was doing this weekly thing for Wave TV, Square Wave TV. My friend David Christian, and does that out of LA, but it's all sorts of people on it. And I was doing like every Friday night, you know. So I started. Sometimes I would pre-record the sets because it's like an hour-long DJ set. And sometimes I don't want to do it at whatever 11 p.m. on Friday night. I would just do it at 3 p.m. and then just play it, and just watch what people say. And they're like, "Oh yeah, my cat is not feeling good," or whatever, that kind of stuff. But sometimes they're like, "Oh, that's a good track," or whatever. No, it's definitely there's something to be learned there. I guess, and it is a way to kind of check in with people when you're doing it. I'm doing bi-monthly, so I do it every 2 weeks, but
I feel like DJing, so admittedly I don't really DJ very often in general. I have a handful of times, and I did one DJ stream early on in quarantine. But I feel like DJing especially, it's maybe harder. I guess things that are truly meant to be dance music, like I've been saying, okay, my music has gotten more rhythmic. It's certainly somewhere closer to the spectrum of dance music than it used to be. That being said, the music that I make is still broken enough that I wouldn't really say it's like the music that you go to the club and party to. I've never really made that sort of techno or whatever. By contrast, if you're trying to do that type of DJ set, I mean, obviously I feel like you don't have to DJ strictly dance music, you can DJ lots of things, but if you're trying to do like a dance music DJ set, I do feel that it's kind of hard to keep up the energy in the current format
totally
without the bodies.
it's that's why I almost prefer to do it with nobody there, or nobody even on Twitch there, because I just feel those low moments where you're like, you feel it, like there's no energy there or whatever, but it does force you to become a better DJ, because you got to get yourself hype about it. You're like, is this going to be good for me, like to listen to? But yeah, I try to play, industrial techno, and I force myself to like do sets with that, even though I know that people are listening to it like on their phone or whatever, and they're not getting anywhere near what the experience is that music is meant for, just like a giant sound system in a broken down warehouse, whatever, kind of vibe or whatever. But it's still fun to put those sets together. But I do get off track, and in the middle I'll start playing other stuff or ambient music or whatever, and it's just like I've tried clearing rooms, quote unquote, just to see how far I can push it, playing a bunch of breakcore and whatever, and people don't seem
I
to
hate
buy
that breakcore clears rooms, for the record. I for one am like super hype when breakcore comes on, but I
Well,
realize that that's not the vibe at the techno show. So
There was a point where breakcore did clear rooms, and now that point was around 2005. Before that, there was a period of like renaissance of breakcore, and I would say it was like the late 90s and early 2000s, and very quickly it became like this clears rooms. It was interesting. And now I feel like it's the kids are into it now or something. I don't know, like it has more of a cloud. I don't know, it has some, like, people are willing to hear it a little more.
This is like the sassiest or most hot take of this session, I guess. But I am cracked up by it. I feel like the trend now is that you play like an all techno set and you end with a single jungle track. Is like the hot thing to do
Right.
if you're like a popular DJ. So I don't know. I'm sort of hoping that gets pushed back and a larger portion of the end of the set becomes
Yeah, you're like,
more
instead of,
breakcore and jungle. But
yeah, I mean,
just
I would be down with it. Yeah, it's you can feel that. You can feel that in the set. The last 10 minutes you can go crazy, whatever. But yeah, it would be cool if it was the last 20 minutes. I don't know. 25 minutes, get 45 minutes. I don't know. Whereas, yeah, start out slow and hard. Well, um, let's see. All right. Well, I've been talking for a bit here. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate you coming on the podcast here, and talking about your craft.
yeah,
'Cause
for sure. I am happy to do it and was glad that uh, my set was pretty different, I know, than a lot of the sets that you had on that live stream. So I'm glad when it can be shown with, other music where the process is so different and that it still hopefully sort of works in its
Oh
own.
no, it totally worked. It totally worked, and that's why, and it was different, and that's what I like about it, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because just to kind of get a little bit of the process behind the thinking there. Yeah. So what you said you're finishing an album, and
I'm trying. It's been slow going. I am sort of ending one research contract and looking for work. And
mm,
admittedly, it's not necessarily the best time to be job searching right now, especially because everything is remote. So a lot of companies are reluctant to kind of hire in that
yeah,
setting. So I don't want to jinx it. I haven't actually been searching for very long yet, but it's you know so that's been taking up some time, I guess, to say the least, especially because I am transitioning, I think, out of academia and into still research settings, but kind of R&D in industry is the goal, and
ah,
that's a little bit different. So I sort of had
sounds
to
exciting. Yeah.
finesse my resume a little bit, et cetera, et cetera. But so that all goes to say that there is, in theory, an album on the way. I would say it's somewhere between 50 and 70% done at the moment, but it's been dragging in recent months because of other commitments. But I would say it's much closer to what I played in your live stream.
I mean,
There
that
were
was, yeah, that was a great 40 whatever minutes, 40 some minutes of stuff there. So I mean, definitely looking forward to that. Um, yeah, that's awesome. Well, tell Kevin I said hi, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Yeah, it was great to see you. Thanks for having me on. I'll pass on the word to Kev.
Oh, thank you. All right, bye.
See you, girl.
The following is a conversation with Danielle Rager. Danielle is a neuroscientist as well as a great electronic music producer. If you like what you hear, you can support us on Patreon. Follow us there on patreon.com/industrial Detroit. Check out our Bandcamp, detroitindustrial.bandcamp.com. And we're on all the social media stuff, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I appreciate your support, and thanks for tuning in.